If at any point the microphone goes out or you can't hear me, also please just let me know. Sometimes these things can be wonky. Okay, so today we're going to talk about conquering APA. And in a lot of ways, APA is something that has to be conquered. It can be frustrating, it can be mind-numbingly precise, it can be picky. All of these things come to mind when I think of APA and students' struggles with getting APA down pat. However, more importantly, APA is a system that allows us to basically use other people's ideas and build on academic research and what's the one I'm looking for? Build on other people's academic work by properly citing them. This event is put on, of course, by City University. We have the doctorate in leadership, the master's in leadership, and the master's in adult education now, not adult learning. That's changed. Okay, so where did APA come from? APA came from the American Psychological Association because the social sciences needed a way to accurately cite their work. MLA is for English majors. Chicago style tends to be used by history majors. There's several different formats out there, but APA became very popular with the social sciences, mostly because of the lead in psychology. Psychologists were using it. People followed suit with them as well and continue to use it. It is very different from the other citation styles. If you've ever seen something written in Chicago style, you'll know that they just put numbers in the work. They believe that numbers help to keep you from having any extra things. Hey, Sean.
Hey.
Welcome.
Hey, sorry I was late.
You can turn off your audio and your video if you need to. Just chat in the chat box if you want to say something. And then if it's a long thing, you can turn on the audio. I just don't want to crash your system. Not that I don't want to see your pretty face. So in Chicago style, they just put numbers in the text. But then you have to read that number and go to the end of the chapter and try to figure out what that number applies to when it comes to the actual reference for that citation. It can be very complicated. Also, they use footnotes, which end up making the page of text really small and a ton of footnotes after that. So APA was kind of the social sciences way of saying we need something that works specifically for us, and that's where they created it from. Schools can also alter APA to use the way they want to, and you'll often see school rules that override APA. For example, in the doctoral program, we don't allow the use of first person or second person. You have to always write in third person. APA allows the use of first person. So in that situation, it's a difference in the doctoral program from the actual APA. But for the most part, APA is the end-all, be-all of what we would call citations. And if you get the manual and you use the manual, you can always call out a professor if they say something's not right by referring them to which page in the manual you've read it on. Now, you have to be prepared that you could be wrong, that you could think something is a periodical when actually it's a conference presentation or something like that. But for the most part, if it's in the APA manual, that's what we all pretty much try to stick by as best we can. Before we get started on the details of APA and digging down deeper into that whole idea, it's important to note that there's a difference between citations and references. What do we mean by the two? Most of you obviously know this already, but it's just good to get it out of the way. The citations are what goes in your paper. It's actually what goes in your writing, and it refers to what's then in your references. The references go end of your paper, and the references at the end of the paper tell the reader where to find the information. And the way I like to describe it to students, and you may have heard this before in one of my other seminars, is that it's a map. APA is a map. And just like it's important when you're giving coordinates on a map or when you're giving a street address, it's important to follow APA precisely as well, because it's the way that you're going to find the information you need to find. You know, if you lived at 123 Main Street, you wouldn't want to tell someone I live at 267 Main Street. They wouldn't get to the right place. And in APA, you make those mistakes by not using commas correctly, not putting the right information in the right spot. Those kind of things will lead someone to maybe not be able to find the information that you are referencing. So when I say it's a map, it's guiding you. It's guiding you as the reader to where this information is. The citation, let me get my little pointer here. The citation is initially where it all starts, and that's in your text. Reading the citation, I know who you're referring to. If I'm an expert in the field, I would probably have read their work. And I also know the year that this work came out. That can tell me two things really quickly. It can tell me if you're citing someone that's big in the field because I recognize their name, or if your citation is recent, or if it's out of date, if it's an older citation. I know that immediately from this. But if I want to know more, then it refers me to the references. That's the next step in the map. The reference then tells me where this can be found in the real world. And that's where I would go if I wanted to get this information. If I couldn't get it from a bookstore, this is a book. So let's say this is a book. If I couldn't get it from a bookstore, I might be able to go straight to the publisher and ask them if it's still in print. Or I may be able to find it digitally somehow. But at least I know that it was published in New York by Taylor and Francis. So it gives me a good start there of where I need to go to find the information. The other thing about APA is, again, and I can't underline this enough, and you'll hear me say this many times, APA is an exact format. In other words, where the periods are, what's capitalized and what's not capitalized, how authors' names are used, how things are italicized. All of these things are important because they give you clues when you're looking at the reference list about what it is that is being referenced and where it came from. So I like to tell people there are 4 parts to an APA reference. Part 1, 2, 3, and 4. Part 1 is the author. This is the person who wrote the information. Now, in some situations, that could be a government entity like the CDC. It could be a law. It could be a web page with no author. These are all options, and all these options are covered in the APA manual, but ultimately, this is the spot it goes in. I know looking at this that I'm looking at the author or where this information was created, who created this information. The second part is the year. The year is always in parentheses. The year has a period before it and a period after it. The year is the year. It's in some places the year of publication, but on websites it could be the year of copyright. Typically you don't put a month with the year, but in certain situations like in conference presentations you may end up adding a month, but typically it's just the year. And then you have the title, or in some places it would be the website name. If you don't have a web page, if you don't have an author and you use the web page name, then you would use the website name here. If you have an author, then typically the title will go into this section. And then the final section, section 4, is the location. Where can this be found? Again, in some places it's going to be a publisher. Others it's going to be a website. In a journal, it's going to be the volume, issue, and journal name. All of these things are part of that location. These are the essential parts of any reference: an author, a year, a title, and a location. And every different type of APA reference has these 4 parts. It just different things that go into the 4 parts. So let's start with the main one. The simplest is a book. You have the author's last name and then the initial. Now, important tip: you never put the full name. It's just an initial. They may have 2 initials. You'd use both. They may have 1 initial. Just use 1. Author, last name, initial. Don't write out the first name. Then the year of publication. You don't need the month, you don't need anything like that, you just need the year for a book. The title of the book, only the first word is capitalized, or the first word after a colon, then you would also capitalize that word, but otherwise it's not capitalized. Why does APA do this? I have no freaking clue why APA does this. It's the weirdest thing ever, and it makes me crazy because I love capitalizing things. So I have no idea why they do it. It's somewhere down the long road of APA, they decided that that's the way they wanted to do it, so fine. But we have to do it because it's the way the format's supposed to go. Then the publisher, location city, the state, and the publisher's name. In some cases, a city may be so famous you don't need to actually put more than London, for example. You don't need London, England. You just need London. In other cases, if it's an obscure city or an obscure place, you're going to need the state, or in the situation where it's a country, you'll need the country name. States can be abbreviated by their initials. You can look at the APA manual and see what those are. And then finally, you do the publisher name. So you have whatever the publisher's name is, and there's a lot of them, but this is how you would basically hunt it down. Then let's jump down to a journal before we go into websites, because websites can get complicated. But for a journal, you still have the author's last name and initial. You still have a year. Again, you don't need to do the month or anything because that's going to be down here in the volume information. You're going to get the title of the article, first word capitalized only, but this is not italics like it is here. And that's because the journal name is in italics. So the journal name should be italicized, and the journal name is capitalized in a normal way. Go figure. Then you have the volume, the issue, and the pages. Following that, you have the DOI number or a persistent link, one or the other. If it does not have a DOI number, then you use the persistent link. And the library has a great tutorial about how to find this on our databases. Either way, what this allows is people to find what you're talking about. The important thing is the journal name, the volume, and the pages. The DOI number just makes it quicker, and a persistent link makes it easier as well. So both of those things, you need one or the other, but both of them help to really define where to find this journal article. For a website, you're still going to want to have an author, if at all possible. But some websites don't have an author, so what do you do then? You move down the next level of importance. That would be the web page title. Now, what is a web page title? It's the title on the web page. I know that sounds silly, but people get confused about this. If you're on a web page and there's a title at the top of it, that's the web page title. Sometimes when you click on the link, you go to a page title, like for example, the home page. You click on that, and in the link, you'll see where it says home. You're on the home page. That's the title of that page. If you can't find a title to your page, like for example, if it's just a website that has no title, it's just a website with a ton of information on it, there's no titles, there's nothing, then you would use the website name, but only if there is no page title. So this is the order of importance. It's more important to find an author, in which case you would use the last name and the initial, just like any other time. If you can't, then the web page title is next, and then finally the website name. And then the year of copyright. Now, sometimes an article that's published on the internet will have an actual publishing date, and that might be different than the copyright. In that case, you want to use the date where it says it was published in the article. However, otherwise use the copyright date for the website. If the website has several copyright dates, use the most recent copyright as the year that you use in this. Then for the section 3, you would then use the information you didn't use up here. So if you did have an author, then in the title, you would put the title of the web page. If you didn't have an author and you used the web page here, then you would put the website name here. Now, so like say you're on Wikipedia, the website name is Wikipedia. You're on CityU, the website name is CityU. This isn't www.cityU.edu. This is the name of the website, Wikipedia, CityU, NASA, whatever the name of the website that you're visiting is would go here. And that's what I mean by website name, both here and here. Then, if you use the website name here in the author area because you didn't have a web page title and you didn't have an author, then voila, you're just going to leave this blank. You would just have the website name, the year, and then the final piece, the location, retrieved from, no year anymore. That was banned after APA 5 changed to APA 6. So no year, no date, just retrieve from, and then the HTTP, the full website address, everything they need to click and go to that exact page. Now, sometimes websites are behind a firewall, and in that case, you need to make a little note. You can make a little note in brackets. Let's see if I can do this here. It would go before the retrieve from, so it would go right here, and you would just basically say bracket, something like whatever it is, password protected, and then you would just put the actual website that they go to, or the home page of the website, whichever they can get to in those situations. Again, it can be super complicated. APA actually has a digital version of the APA manual that is only for electronic sources. And funny enough, it's only available on electronic device like the Kindle or the iPad. So you can download that from Amazon for like $4 or $5. It's the electronic version of the APA manual. You can't get a print copy though, which is just funny. But that gives you a lot more information about how to do websites and everything like that. And in some situation, it's interesting because the electronic version of the APA manual does tell you things like how would you cite a Facebook post? How would you cite a Snapchat or an Instagram post? And in many of those cases, like for example, if you're citing a specific post from Obama on Facebook, there is a specific way to do that. If you're just citing his whole entire Facebook feed as an example of something, you just need to put the Facebook website in, and you actually don't need a reference for that. Anytime you're citing information from an entire website or using an entire website as an example, you just need to put the website, the www.blah-blah-blah.com in parentheses, and you don't need a reference for that. So that's a special case. You won't find that very often when you're using actually academically reputable sources. They're almost always going to have some kind of author, and you're not going to have you be using the whole website. You're just going to be using an article or two that you found. Any questions so far? Once you master these 4 sections, you really do get APA. And you can look down someone's reference list, and in just a second, you can see where they're having problems, where things happen. I could spot a written out first name from 100 miles away. I see it coming, and I'm like, oh God, here it comes. Okay, I don't see any questions. Remember, if you have questions, you can just type them in the chat area. But if you really want to talk, you're welcome to let me know, and you can talk. But for the most part, just type it in the chat area if you have a question. Okay. Now, yeah, but that's the hardest thing in the entire world, mixing up MLA and APA. I swear I was an English major for my bachelor's, and then I got my master's in counseling. It took me months and months to not keep trying to use MLA, because MLA seemed so easy to me. And the manual, the MLA manual, had everything you needed. If you wanted to know how to reference a journal that was written in Austria, they had a freaking page for that you could go to really easily. APA is much more vague and much more complicated. So it actually, it's not more complicated, it's just really different, and it's really hard to adapt. But you'll get it, because I got it, and now I'm an APA expert, and I don't even remember MLA anymore. So, but it will take some time. That's the hardest thing. Okay, so citations. Citations come, yes, Bridget, that's exactly right. Citations come from part 1 and 2. What do I mean part 1 and 2? I mean parts 1 here. Oh, sorry. There we go. Parts 1 here and parts 2. That's where the citations come from. They live from parts 1 and 2. The reason for that, so that when you're looking for the reference, it's really quick and easy because you can see the first 2 parts of the reference in the citation. You can scan down the citation list really quickly and then find those first 2 parts. So the author's last name and the year. Let me say that again. The author's last name and the year. Do not use the author's first name. Just the author's last name and the year. Even when you're writing in a sentence, you don't want to say John Cresswell. You just want to say Cresswell. This is the way that we do it. It makes things quicker. There are going to be a few rare occasions when you will use initials, and I'll talk to you about that in just a moment. When you have a quote, a direct quote that you're putting in quotation marks, then you also have a page number. And a page number can go in a couple of different places, and we'll talk about that as well. For websites, you use what is in section 1, which is either the web page name, the author name, whatever. But you shorten it to a few words in quotes if it's a long web page name. So if the web page name is like the How to Conquer APA as told by Dr. Presley Rankin, you can just put it in quote marks and say how to use APA, quote unquote. So you only need 3 words of the name. Now in the reference you'll have the whole name, but in citations you only need 3 words with the quotation marks. This is if you don't have an author. For a quote, you still want to use the page number if you're using electronic document with pages. But if you're not, then you want to put in the section heading and the paragraph number. And the way you abbreviate paragraph is P-A-R-A period. So for pages it's P period, for paragraphs it's P-A-R-A period. And then the number of paragraphs down from the top of the page. If the web page does have 3 or less words, you don't need to use the quote marks here. You just type in the name of the web page. And again, it's the same thing. If there's no web page name and no author, then the website title would go first. Particularly in situations where you're in some kind of website that's just a dump of information that doesn't have a lot of other details. Most of you already know this, but I'm just going to go over it just so that it's in the ether, so that I can say I did it. It's important to understand that in most cases you're going to do a summary. It's better academic writing to summarize what you've read and not use quotes. There's nothing more annoying to a professor than to a student just randomly sticking in quotes just to show that they read the work or that they found something from an article. There's no need to use quotes unless the quotes are really something important that you can't say any other way, that you can't figure out any other way. And for the doctoral program, Jeff, you just can't use quotes at all. So you're going to have to figure out a way to summarize everything. So when you summarize, you're basically taking what was said before and saying it in your own words. Remember, what you're citing, what we're using APA for is ideas. The ideas of the authors. That's what you're trying to capture here. It's not their words that are important, it's their ideas. And you want to give them credit for their ideas. You want to give them credit for the things they found or the philosophies they have or whatever they've said in their article. You want to give them credit for that. So therefore, you can take their idea and say their idea in your own words. You're still going to cite it. It's still going to be a citation. You can either cite it in the sentence or you can cite it by using the author's name. I'll show you some examples of that in a second. Or like this one here, Albertson says, or Albertson posts, or Albertson researched and found, blah, blah, blah. whatever the way you want to do it. You always need the year. Do not just use the first name. Now, here's an interesting APA thing, because we're talking about conquering APA, so let's talk about an interesting thing. And Sean, when we get to the end and we do questions, will you bring back up the blog and we'll talk about that? Unless it's really relevant right this second. Okay. Here's an interesting APA thing. APA says that if you cite the author and the year at the beginning of a paragraph, and you're talking about the author throughout the paragraph, you don't have to use the year anymore. I hate that. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. I just hate it. In case you're wondering, I hate it. Now, but you can still do it. It's in the APA manual. It's crazy, makes no sense, but you can do it. And that goes back to the part of, here's what's important with APA. You want the reader to know when you're talking and when it's your ideas and opinions, and you want the reader to know when you're referring to someone else's ideas, and it needs to be crystal clear. I need to know as a reader when the author finishes talking. And so usually what I tell people is you start a paragraph. If you're going to have a whole paragraph that talks about one author, say you're going to have a whole paragraph talking about Rankin's APA webinar. What I like to do is I like to bookend it. So I start the paragraph. Well, you start the paragraph with an introductory sentence, but then when I'm starting to talk about the author, I'll say Rankin 2017 said that blah, 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 blah. He also said blah, 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 blah. He goes on to say blah, 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 blah. And then in the last sentence that I use information from this article, I would put a parenthetical citation. So I would put in parentheses Rankin 2017 at the very end. So now as the reader, I know where you started talking about Rankin and when you finished talking about Rankin. And then I know everything after that last citation is your own words. So everything here, this is in the white, this is my own words that I'm adding to put in context what I read. And that's what you do as the writer, is you're putting the ideas that you're finding from your research into your paper, and then you're telling the reader why you did that. Why did you tell me this information? Why are you using this reference? You need to tell me that. That's what you want to do in your own words. Now, obviously, you wouldn't want to do it in first person. You'd want to do it in third person, but the principle is still the same. It basically is telling me, I picked this idea up from research. Here's what it means. And in the higher levels, like in the doctoral program, you're going to want to do some evaluation. You're going to want to say, this author said this, but this other author said this. The better author was this author because of this, kind of thing. So you want you to put it into a context of why you're saying it. These three authors said all the same thing. They said this. This one author says this. That author happens to be using a new type of research, which gives different opinions. So you're just telling me what it is you're saying and why you're saying it. Okay, now, I've told everyone many times, there's also a great website that you can go and get APA stuff from, and it's called the OWL at Purdue. Purdue University has an online writing lab that has a bunch of writing tips for people. It also has MLA, and it has APA. So you always want to make sure you go to the OWL APA and not just the general OWL website, because that can cause you to get a little confused. The OWL website has many resources. They have sample papers. They also have this wonderful PowerPoint, which I'm also incorporating because it brings in some other things that I want to talk about. But I've been talking for a little bit, so let me answer Sean's question before we move on to this next section. Sean, what was the question you had about the blog?
Okay, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, I on week 9 post just recently, I cited a blog, and I'm going to add it right here. The blogger only had a first name, and I know that everything else is fine here. The blog post retrieved. So what I do? How do I account for not having a last name?
Very good question. So in that situation, it's the same thing for if you're doing a tweet. It's okay to use whatever the person's name is that they're using in this situation. So if it's Twitter name, you would just put the Twitter name, and that would using the @ sign, at blah blah blah. If it is a situation where it's a blog with just the one person's name, then you just put their first name. It's the only name that they use on their blog.
Okay.
And so that's a situation like that. Now there's certain red flags that as a good networker or a good user of research that you start to learn. And one of those is that, you know, in situations where you're not getting someone's full name, you have to wonder why. What is it about that site that you're not getting the person's full name? They're not using their name. In some cases, it can be that the site is informal, which is what you would need to know when you're evaluating that information, that this is an informal site. This is a something that is not using, you know, the typical information. In some cases, it's a situation where it is a site that's run by a company, and the company just has employees update that. And in that situation, the employees will sometimes informally just use their first name. And that could be the case as well. You would need to know how reputable that website was. But you'll know that when you run into these situations. You jump into it and you're like, oh, okay, this is an issue. And so in that way, you want to make sure that you understand in these situations when that happens, that you might be using something that's not as reputable as an academic source, which in some cases is totally fine. Okay, so the other stickler about APA, if you want to really conquer APA, is the formatting of your actual paper. And APA has very strict guidelines about how a paper is formatted, and in the APA manual they have example papers. You can also get example papers from the OWL. Everything has a reason, and a lot of the reason comes from the old days when things were actually printed and not electronic. But the bottom line is we try to follow these rules just because it makes it easier to, everybody's stuff looks the same. And let me go on a little soapbox rant about everything looking the same. This is why it's important. Many of you are going to someday want to teach, I hope. And when you're teaching, and when you have a class, and that class has 30 students in it, and they turn in a paper that's 5 pages long, that is 150 pages that you have to read and grade. The reason APA uses New Times Roman 12-inch font, double-spaced, is because the brain learns to read that quickly. And when you're reading it, you don't have to bother with trying to interpret. Your brain doesn't have to bother with trying to interpret when the font changes. What does it mean that the font changes? What does it mean that something's bold? What does it mean that it's italicized? What does it mean that it's in a different size than the other text? When you have those kind of things, it stops the reader. The reader has to stop, even if it's just for a second, to kind of figure out what is that meaning? Why is it different from the rest of the stuff? That's why we do this. That's why we have standardization, because it makes it easier for the reader, in this case the professor who's going to actually give you a grade, to see what's in your work. And I can promise you, I could take a student's paper that's written in APA format, and I can read through it in a minute and tell you if it's got the right information in it, because it's properly formatted. A paper that I have to actually dig down into and read really closely is typically a paper that isn't written well, because it either is not organized properly or it is not in the right format. And in either of those situations, it's much harder to slug through that paper. And sometimes you're going to miss the good stuff that the student has in the paper because you'll get confused by their organization. So again, that's why we do this. So the page header, the first page typically has running head, and then the title of the paper is here. It's typically all caps, and then you have the page number. Then the title page here has the information on it, your university, your name, the title of your paper. Next page is an abstract. Now, for the doctoral program, they require an abstract. I do not require that for my master's program, and I don't think the master's in leadership as well does not require an abstract. But it's good to learn to do an abstract because it does help you to learn to say things quicker and basically more concisely. The abstract's between 150 to 250 words. And then there's oftentimes keywords here. Keywords aren't required pretty much by any academic program. But, you know, that's how it goes. Yeah, Sean, and that's the case. Those cases are going to be more rare in the new program. I don't ask for abstracts in the new program. Shouldn't be, at least. You might have to go screen them out. The number of the first page of text is typically the third page, because you have the title, you have the abstract, and then the third page is where the actual work starts. You type and center the title of the paper at the top of the page. Type the text double spaced with all the sections following it. Identify the sources in the paper. You can format tables and figures. All of this is in the APA manual. This is just kind of the stuff that goes in the actual paper. Now, one of the important things that you learn when you're writing academically is typically the first page of your work is understood to be the introduction, and it's only going to have the title of the paper at the top of it. Everyone knows that's the introduction section. In some cases, the instructor is going to ask you to actually write an introduction, and in that case, you can use introduction as the title of that first section. You wouldn't put the title of the paper in. You don't need both. Otherwise, it's also understood that if you use the title of the paper, that first section is your introduction. The references go at the very end. The title is centered, but it's not bold. References are double spaced. The first line is flush with the side. The rest of it is indented. And the names go in alphabetically. Okay, so here's, again, a little bit about what we have here in using quotations and using citations. Now, this is a good place to also point out, do not use quote marks for any other reason than to do a quote. If you have a word that's a special vocabulary word, or you want to use a word with emphasis, use italics for both of those situations. Do not use quote marks, because quote marks say you're quoting something, and when you never quote just one word. You should never have a one-word quote or a two-word quote. So therefore, if an author uses a special word that they made up, like supercalifragilistic, and you want to say that this is the author's special word, you put it in italics. That's how that works. But when you do use quotes, you have the choice of either using the author's name in the sentence and then having the quote, and then you put the page number at the end before the period. Or you could just use the quote in the sentence and put the author's name at the end, all three parts, last name, year, and page number. These are the two different ways you can do quotes. But you do not do both. You don't put the year here and put the year here. And it's always preferable when you use the author's name, a year immediately follows it. So don't put the author's name here and then the year and the page number. Why? Do you ask that? The same thing as what I was saying before. It's consistency. You expect to see the year after the author's name, which is why I hate the new APA thing that lets you just use the author's name in a paragraph after you've used the name of the year once. I hate that for that reason, because when I see author's name, I expect to see a year immediately after it. When you don't, it gets confusing. So don't do it. Again, like I was saying, when you paraphrase something, just put the author's name at the end. You can also paraphrase by using the author's name at the beginning in the sentence text, like this. And when you do that, you keep the year with it, but that's all you need. And this is really elementary stuff, but I like to go over it just to remind people. Again, this is another thing. Signal phrases. So there are web pages that you can go to that give you many, many, many options about how you're going to introduce an author. You want to vary those author introductions, and if you look under author introductions and look that up on the web, you'll find different ways to academically introduce authors. You can say things like according to, or Xavier argued that, hoisted, contended, arranged, responded, reported, concluded, maintained. There are many different ways to use it, but these are signal verbs that let you know we're talking about an author. Authors are always talked about in past tense. The research that someone does is always talked about in past tense. I don't know what present perfect tense is. I couldn't tell you this right now off the top of my head, but use the present perfect tense in signal phrases when they discuss past events. You grammarians will know what that means. When you oftentimes, especially when you're doing synthesis, which is a higher level of writing that we expect in the master's program when you get to the end, near the end of the program, and we expect in the doctoral program from the beginning. Synthesis is where you take the ideas from many people and put them together. It's as simple as that. You take 3 different ideas and you merge them in to make one point, or you say 3 or 4 people had the same idea. So you're giving it a lot of credit. You're saying this idea, 5 people, 5 different articles came up with the same idea. So this is something that is apparently very true or very important. You do that by having multiple author citations. And multiple author citations use, again, the last name of the year, separated with a semicolon. They're in alphabetical order, and you put all the authors that connect with this. But the one thing you want to avoid is you don't want to stick an author in a multiple author citation that only said part of what you're saying they said, or only said a little bit of it. If you're saying all these authors agree, then they need to all have agreed on it. Remember, if that author came back and read it, would they say, yes, I did actually say that? Okay, here's a big one that people miss on APA tests very often. You use the word and when you're using multiple authors in a sentence, but you use the ampersand sign when you're doing it in a citation that's in parentheses or in the references. The references and in this parenthetical citation is what it's called. You use the ampersand. But if you're writing it in the sentence, you want to use and. Does that make sense? Is everybody clear on that, on those distinctions? It's a small distinction, but it will get you into trouble. Awesome. Okay. When you have a work that has 3 to 5 authors, the first time you use that, you have to cite all the authors' last names, up to 5. If there's more than 5, or if you've already cited them one time, use the words et al. It's Latin for and more. Once you've cited something once, using the full author's names, up to 5 authors, then you just put the first author's last name and et al., period, comma, and then the year. If the reference has 6 or more authors, you can immediately use et al. You don't have to use, you don't have to cite all those authors and list them all out. And believe me, your professors will check if they see an et al. Before they've seen it written out. They'll run to your reference list to make sure that that had 6 or more. So make sure you only do that in that situation. And this is exactly what I was saying there. You also can use et al. In the sentence itself. So Smith et al. Maintained that. That's one of those situations. Now, sometimes you're not going to have an author, or the author is unknown. In these rare situations, you want to go back to your APA manual and try to figure out exactly what is there and what is not there. In the case often of government websites, you would just need to use the name of the website. But if that's only if the you don't have any other information. And you could do the 3-word rule as well. I don't know why they only have 1 word here, but this is basically saying once you've cited it, you can say it like this. Really, you want to use 3 words in that. And that goes back to the website stuff I was telling you before. In citing an organization, again, you can put the organization's name. If it has a common abbreviation, just put the abbreviation after the name, and then from there on, you can refer to the organization by the abbreviation. You should know that. Now, here's the only time that you can use initials. The only time you can use initials. If you have 2 authors that have the exact same last name, and they're the only author, there's not other authors, it's just that author, and it's a different author from the same author with the last name, as you see here. Then you put the initials at the beginning of the author's name to distinguish between the 2. This is B. Karachu, this is Y. Karachu. That is the difference, and you need to make that known. But there are some times when you have the same author who is the same person, and they've published multiple things during the same year. Now, if they publish multiple things in different years, you just cite them and reference them normally. But if they published multiple things in the same year, you just add A, B, C to the citations to match the references, which you would also have A, B, and C on. Again, the reader can look at Smith 1999A and then jump down to the reference list and immediately see those 2 things and know that they found the right reference for this citation. Now, this is some dry material, I know. Personal communication includes anything that you've communicated with, an interview, a letter, an email. And this is really, though, for if you were using a lecture that your professor did, if you are quoting something that someone has told you that's professional, in those situations you would use the personal communication. In a situation where you're asked to review your organization or you're asked to reflect on something, you don't need to use personal communication. It's only when you're presenting something as if it were fact that you need to say who that fact came from. So in this situation, A.P. Smith also claimed that many of her students had difficulties with APA. This is a fact. This person, A.P. Smith, is saying her students had problems with APA. That is a fact that you're using in your work. In that situation, you would want to say it's personal communication and when you heard it from. Personal communications, as of APA 6.0, do not get included in the reference list. It's exciting. Okay, we've got 5 more minutes. I've got a few more slides here. I said that already. Okay, headings. Headings. If you're in the Master of Adult Education program, I'm a headings freak. And I believe that the same reason I'm a headings freak is the same reason I love APA citations is because it makes it easier to read your work. And if you have a big blob of text with no headings in it, it's almost impossible for me to grade it and give you the grade you earned because I can't find the freaking things you're saying are supposed to be in the paper. Basically, APA has 5 levels. Typically, only 2 of them are used. The main level 1, which is the big citation area, centered, bold, and then level 2, which is left justified and bold. Those are the 2 main ones. There's also a level 3. Level 3 is when you use, and when you indent it, it starts your paragraph. So you use the title, a period, and then immediately after this, your paragraph starts. You start talking. Sometimes you'll go down to that level, and then of course there's a level 4 too. You typically won't go down that far. Any questions about headings before we move on? Typically 1 and 2 are the main ones you're going to use. Okay. Again, this is the OWL at Purdue. You can go here. APA, they also have a blog, apastyle.org. And the blog answers a lot of questions as well. If you have particular situations, you usually can find it on the blog. Okay, got 2 minutes here. I kind of already went over websites. The main thing to remember with websites is that you want to try to find an author. If you can't, use the web page title. If you can't, use the website title. Only use N period, D period if there is no date anywhere in the entire website. If there's no copyright date, there's no date of the article was published, there's no date defining when the website was created. If there's no date at all, then you can use N period, D period. But that should be really rare. Did that. Again, best if you have an author, year, web page name, retrieve from the website address. If you don't, web page name, website name, retrieve from the web address. If you have to, website name, retrieve from web address. All of these are valid options for websites, but you always want to try for the best as your goal. Okay, that's it for this webinar. Does anybody have any final questions? It's very rare, Sean, in a paper for anybody to get to level 4. Level 4 is often used in, if you're doing a dissertation level work where you have 5 chapters and 300 pages, you may get down to a level 4. But really, in a paper that's 3 to 5 pages, you should never get down more than level 2. In a longer paper, like 10-page paper, you might get down to a level 3. But often level 1 and 2 are really the best that you can go by. Well, of course you do. Oh, any other questions? Jeff, Bridget, any questions from y'all? Awesome. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you all for participating. It really helps when there's an audience, and a lot of the students who are going to be watching this on video will probably be wondering the same things that y'all are wondering. So it's good to have you here. Have a great evening, and I'll be seeing you in the classroom.